Hi, my name is Kayleigh Fraser. I'm a UK citizen and I'm speaking to you from here in Sri Lanka, where I've been residing for the past 1.5 years, carrying out independent research on plant medicines, specifically for cancer treatment. In April this year, I attended the protest site at Golface Green in Colombo. I spoke openly and factually about what I witnessed at the site and about the impressively peaceful nature of the protesters. I was warned many times by civilians about my own personal safety at the protest site. Countless people, especially the older population, warned of how this government had treated people who spoke out against it in the past, specifically about family and friends who were put into unmarked vans and never seen again. There was a high level of collective fear. Many people were begging me to make sure my photos got to the international community to show what was happening here, as they feared that the government would suppress this protest. Over the coming months, I shared as much content as I could on social media to help protect the rights and the freedoms of the people. Key events that I reported on included the repeated use of the state of emergency to prevent gatherings, the brutal May the 9th attacks on the protest site by thugs who attended a rally at then PM Mahinda Rajapaksa's residence. Hundreds of men with metal batons stormed towards unarmed men, women and children at the protest site, and countless were injured. Tents were burned, people were badly beaten as the police stood by and watched. I watched people begging police officer to intervene and to help them, to which I saw a senior officer actually laugh in the face of a person who was asking for help. There was an absolute violation of both constitutional and human rights that day. I then raised my voice about the repeated use of chemical weapons against protesters. In some cases, there were less than 100 protesters peacefully in attendance when tear gas was repeatedly released upon them. I informed the public that tear gas is actually illegal to use against soldiers in war, and about the harmful and ongoing after effects resulting from its use. I also shared evidence of canisters used against the people that were dated from 2004, which are clearly expired, given that other canisters showed a 5-year expiration date. On June 13th, one 26-year-old Sri Lankan youth died of respiratory failure after inhaling such gas. On July 20th, as Ranil was voted in as president, open-sided military helicopters began circling the protest site, flying dangerously low in between buildings. I watched as machine guns were pointed at unarmed civilians, instilling mass fear and panic into everybody there. The following night, the military were instructed to move in on the protest site, beating people who included disabled ex-servicemen, journalists and even bystanders. Some key protesters were identified and taken away to the railway line, where they reported being subjected to degrading and inhumane treatment, such as being forced to walk on their knees. No one was allowed to enter or leave the protest site during the next 7 hours. Medical treatment was denied to those who needed it, all in further violation of human rights. On August 1st, I personally received a call from the agent who arranged my visa, anxiously telling me to leave the country, saying that senior government officials and intelligence agencies were inquiring about me and that I needed to leave immediately. The following morning, 6 officers claiming to be from immigration surrounded me outside my house and demanded my passport, threatening to put me in handcuffs if I didn't comply with them. They forced their way onto my property and they attempted to force their way into my house, which was highly alarming. I repeatedly asked what offence I'd supposedly committed, and I was told that they had to check what visa I was on first before they could determine what the offence was. I was repeatedly told not to make this difficult and to comply. After handing my passport over for them to check, they detained it and they told me to report to immigration within 7 days for an investigation, where they questioned me repeatedly about my reasons for attending the protests at Golface Green and about the videos that I'd made. They recorded my statement while my lawyer was instructed to wait in another room. At this point, I'd been detained for around 6 hours. Immigration officers then printed out a transcript of the interview, which was highly paraphrased and not dictated word for word. And on one of the last pages, it stated that I'd answered yes to a question of having conducted a business here, which I pointed out to them was wrong because I'd clearly answered no. They told me I could not change my answer, and instead I had to sign a paper saying I'd changed my answer after reading my statement. I refused to do this, knowing that I hadn't said this, and I certainly hadn't done this. and insisted that they replay the tape of my interview to verify. They were really angry and they made me wait a further 1.5 hours while they did this, and of course they confirmed that's not what I said. My passport was still not returned to me, and instead I was instructed to return 2 days later. The police spokesperson and attorney told the media in regards to the detaining of my passport that I'd brought the Sri Lankan government and military into disrepute, that it's not right for a foreigner to be sharing such mass negative content, and this is why my passport had been detained. I returned to immigration 2 days later to be handed a letter with no investigation, no questioning, just handed a letter to say, "We regret to inform you that your visa's been cancelled. You're advised to leave the country on or before August 15th, which was essentially in 4 days' time, giving only 1 working day. Human rights defender and lawyer Nagananda petitioned the Court of Appeal on my behalf about immigration's decision. However, in court, immigration claimed the cancelling my visa had nothing to do with the protest coverage, and instead brought up 2 separate and false allegations against me, which my lawyer had no prior knowledge of, resulting in the judge dismissing the case. We are currently awaiting the result of a fundamental rights case and further appeal to the Supreme Court in regards to this matter. I raised my voice here in support of the Sri Lankan people, and I've been persecuted for it. There is no freedom of expression or speech here in Sri Lanka. Estimates are already at over 2,500 people arrested to date for attending the protests, and warrants were put out for the arrest of very prominent and vocal protesters, such as the peaceful Father Jiwantha, Buddhist monks, and even lawyers and teachers are being arrested. When these arbitrary arrests began, many were told the charges would be dropped if the people agreed not to return to the protest site. This is what's happening in Sri Lanka. This is not what the mainstream media is reporting, but this is what is happening in reality. To date, no one has been arrested or held accountable for the May the 9th or July 22nd attacks on the protesters, in spite of numerous identifiable photos of attackers being publicly circulated, which even include prominent state ministers. There is no rule of law here in this country. There is certainly no equal protection for citizens being granted when police are on one hand instructed to pursue a youth who took a photo in the president's chair instead of, say, 3 men who are on camera beating a 50-year-old woman, breaking her ribs. The protesting has been successfully and forcibly suppressed by President Ranil. The police and military who are paid to protect and uphold the freedoms and rights of the people are being used against them. This is nothing short of state terrorism, and it shows no signs of ending. The citizens of Sri Lanka are begging the international community for help. Meanwhile, the prominent leaders and international organisations appear to be ignoring the plight of the people and instead supporting this government. I am watching as the human rights of the people are continually violated without consequence, and the people of Sri Lanka are again forced to return to an existence of poverty, fear, and silence under this oppressive regime. Is this really the world that we're going to allow our children to inherit?